Hello and welcome to Crosstalk, where all things are considered. I'm Peter Lavelle. U.S.-China talks are back on track, but a second front has opened up. U.S.-Europe trade is heading into a storm. Iran is again in the center of the debate. Also, the circus has come to town, and it's called the Democratic primary. Cross-talking some real news. I'm joined by my guest here in Moscow, Dmitry Babich. He's a political analyst and editor at InnosMe Internet Media Project. And in London, we cross to Marcus Papadopoulos. He is the editor of Politics First magazine. All right, gentlemen, crosstalk rules in effect. That means you can jump in anytime you want, and I always appreciate it. Let's go to Marcus first in London. The resumption of U.S.-China trade talks is taking a lot of headlines, as it should. It's a very important issue on the back of the G20. But we have this special purpose vehicle being established, is established now in Europe to bypass the American SWIFT system for the Europeans to trade with Iran. I wonder, when the Donald is back in Washington, how he's going to respond to that, because I think we all know how he will. Go ahead, Marcus.
The introduction of the Instex payment system by the Europeans as a way of trying to circumvent the American restrictions on countries wanting to trade with Iran. The Instex payment system is not only a goodwill gesture by the Europeans to Iran, it is also a way of the Europeans trying to keep Iran in the JCPOA deal, and it is also a way of the Europeans retaining access to the Iranian markets, which, after all, is an important market for Europe, in particular for countries like Germany and France. But, Peter, for the Instex payment system to be sustainable and effective, it must apply to oil purchasing, because Donald Trump's sanctions on Iran, which are arguably the most dangerous that America has placed on Iran over the last 40 years, are going for Iran's jugular, and that jugular is Iran's ability to export oil. If the European payment system does not apply to the purchasing by other countries of Iranian oil, then I do strongly suspect that Iran will eventually leave the JCPOA, and also the Iranian economy will be in serious trouble, because Donald Trump does want to asphyxiate the Iranian economy.
Exactly.
And how to do that? You go for the jugular, which is Iran's oil.
Marcus, before I go to Dima here, how much is this also in a sense of the European Union claiming some form of economic sovereignty? I mean, the last time we had a country dictating other countries' trade policy was the Soviet Union with its Eastern European satellites. I mean, this is very, very authoritarian, dictating to countries who they can trade with. I mean, this also is a sovereignty issue, yes?
I agree with you, Peter. Look, the European Union, whilst it is a strategic ally to America, it is also an economic rival. And I applaud the way that Berlin and Paris are making the case for trading with Iran, the way that the Germans and the French are supporting the JCPOA. But the American representative on Iran has recently said again that Europe has a choice. It either trades with America or trades with Iran. And Peter, the problem is that the Iranian market, even though it's lucrative, of course it can't compete with the American market. And that's where my concern is, that when push comes to shove, businesses in Germany and France could very well ditch Iran for the American market.
There's the intimidation here. You know, Dima, one of the reasons why I wanted to do this topic is because in a much broader way, the United States is using the dollar and the SWIFT system. It's been weaponized, okay? But this is remarkable that the U.S. is going to leverage the SWIFT system against its allies, not against its adversaries here. I mean, what I see here, this is devaluing the currency, the global currency, the U.S. dollar, and it's the U.S. that's doing it itself. It's very self-destructive and it's self-inflicted. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, look at the statistics. In 2013, less than 7% of the trade between China and Russia was in yuan, because, there was a lot of talk about the need to distance ourselves from the dollar, but there was no immediate need in 2013. So things were going slowly. But already in 2017, it was 18% of the trade that was in other currencies other than dollars. So the movement is in that direction, and it's interesting how the American liberal press is reacting to that. You know, Fareed Zakaria in the Washington Post writes that this idea of Instex is it's basically a warning sign, the canary in the coal mine. End of the quote. At least some humor from Fareed Zakaria. Well, that canary in the coal mine has been there for many years now, because it was not just Trump, as Fareed Zakaria writes, it's not just Trump administration's abuse of power. It's also Obama's administration's abuse of power. It's Bill Clinton's abuse of power. So things were piling up, and we all remember how somehow the war against Iraq started soon after Saddam Hussein switched their payments for the Iraqi oil to euros.
And we can see the same case with Libya as well.
It's not only Europe. India, Wall Street Journal is writing that it has evidence that India is buying oil from Iran directly, bypassing the American banks, bypassing the Federal Reserve System, which has this terrible system of correspondent banks.
Right.
Only the correspondent banks can transact. So India is doing that. Turkey, of all the countries, after the Turkish lira fell dramatically in 2018, Neue Zürcher Zeitung is writing that Erdogan has been blaming foreign conspiracies for the fall.
It is foreigners that are doing it.
The problem is that a lot of alternative media and some of the mainstream media in the United States directly linked the fall of lira to the actions of the United States.
Well, there's absolutely ample evidence.
And Erdogan switched to direct payments.
Let me go back to Marcus in London. I mean, this is a very interesting trend, and I think future historians will look back at this as how the U.S. destroyed its own currency position in the world, because irrespective of politics, it was a system where you could get business done. Now, if it's being politicized like this, the trend is, why get involved? Because you don't have to be necessarily afraid of the Pentagon. You have to be afraid of the Treasury Department now. This using it as a political weapon is dangerous and self-destructive, and people are going to start using other mechanisms, as we see started in Europe. Go ahead, Marcus.
Well, I think, Peter, it's plausible to argue that the dollar is even more potent to countries around the world than the American military. I say it's possible. In my opinion, that is absolutely the case. But I still do not see any evidence, any tangible evidence to suggest that the dollar is going to collapse, that it is going to be surpassed by another currency in the world. If we take China, for example, China is also has also been accused by the Americans of circumventing the American restrictions on purchasing oil from Iran. But it wouldn't take that much from the Americans to deter China from continuing to buy Iranian oil. Why? Because China's economic progress over the last 40 years, beginning with Deng Xiaoping, which has been miraculous, has been largely based on China's trading and investment relationship with America. And the Chinese will not do anything to jeopardize that. And if that means they stop buying oil from Iran, then Beijing will do that. What's crucial to the Chinese economy is America.
Dima, I mean, but this is a process here. I agree with Marcus Papadopoulos. I mean, the dollar isn't going to collapse overnight, but it's starting a trend. It's starting a trend where, if you want to avoid political problems, maybe diversify your portfolio and not rely so much on the dollar. And of course, with the political and geopolitical events going on in the Middle East, I mean, the petrodollar is at stake here. Nothing short of that. Go ahead.
Right now, 60% of the savings, around the world are done in dollars. Only 20% of the savings are done in euros. But that is the trend. More and more savings are done in euros, in Japanese yen, in Chinese yuan. People are diversifying their investments in order to shield themselves from, basically from confiscations.
Exactly.
The reason why Russia is talking so much about switching to our own currencies between us and China, between us and Iran and other countries, the reason is, 12 biggest Russian companies were under sanctions last year. And when it was announced in April 2018, it was then that the Russian central bank started worrying that actually our assets in the United States could be frozen. And this is written in the mainstream press in the West. It's not a secret, you know. It's natural. Our Minister of Finance, Siluanov, suggested that companies that trade with their foreign partners in their currencies or in rubles, that they should get tax breaks. So it's becoming profitable not to trade in dollars.
Okay, let me go back to. I want to switch gears real quick, Marcus. I mean, there's an iconic picture floating around where Putin meets Theresa May. It looked like they were in divorce court. It was really an amazing picture here. She was not happy, but she has a lot of reasons not to be happy. I guess that picture is Putin's going away present to her. Go ahead. 1 minute to you.
Well, Peter, Theresa May is still reeling from having been forced out of power by her own party, indeed by her own cabinet. In a similar way, we could argue that Margaret Thatcher was forced out of power. So I think that is the reason why Theresa May looked distraught in that photo of Mr. Putin. Indeed, she actually looks distraught at Parliament. When I'm at Parliament and I see her from the press gallery, she does look a broken person. But we also have to remember that Britain and Russia have never liked each other, and they never will like each other.
Dima, 10 seconds. Go ahead.
Well, I think that she wanted to be frosty, and she was frosty. She was the snow queen. But I'm not sure that she was the positive character here.
Is that the lasting image she wants the world to see?
If she stays in history like that, she will be frozen, you know. That's exactly the kind of frostiness.
She was frozen in the worst prime minister in modern history.
Absolutely.
Okay, gentlemen, I'm going to jump in here. Thanks, Marcus. After a short break, we'll continue our discussion on some real news. Stay with RT. Welcome back to Crosstalk, where all things are considered. I'm Peter Lebel. To remind you, we're discussing some real news. Okay, and now we go to Athens, and we're joined by Alex Christoforou. He is a director and writer for theduran.com. Alex, I'm going to go to you first here. I watched, I have to confess, not all of the two Democratic debates, okay? I wasn't willing to give so much time away to that show. And I was trying to just think of a catchy phrase for them. And I would call them maybe like the free Democrats, because everything is free. Everything is free except for American citizens. It looks like they were really on the road campaigning, canvassing for illegals to participate in it, because that's all they seem to talk about. Free health care, free education, no longer criminalizing breaking the law by crossing the border illegally. I mean, this was really a circus, wasn't it? Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, Peter, it was a clown show, and you're exactly right. I think the second night of the debates, you could watch it. It was watchable. The first night, I mean, was just, I think Trump summed it up best with one word. It was boring. It was very, very boring.
Oh, but I mean, they all said the same thing. Yeah, they all had the same script.
It was awful. It was impossible to watch the whole thing. Impossible. I don't even know how those people, you know, in the actual auditorium actually got through the event. But Peter, you're right. The Democrats are moving so far left. I think Democrats, people who are going to be voting in the primary, Democrats in Middle America, in the heartland, they don't understand what party this is anymore. I mean, the Democrats seem to be addressing a voter base that either one doesn't even live in the United States and can't vote, or number two, basically lives in Hollywood or somewhere in Park Avenue or on Wall Street. That's it. I mean, all the policies that they were discussing, Peter, was all about open borders coupled with health care, endless war, Orange Man bad, Russia did it, 50% tax rate, infanticide. I mean, these are positions that to even the most progressive American is unrecognizable for the Democrat Party.
And Alex, in all of the issues you just mentioned, not even 50% of the population agrees with those positions. It's not even close to 50%, and they're running with it. Dima, okay, Alex and I have poured enormous cold water on these two primary debates. But you probably know which 7 minutes one person spoke in the first debate that made sense, and it's the Congresswoman from Hawaii.
Exactly. Tulsi Gabbard said this very simple thing: no war with Iran, and that was the wisest thing that I heard from that show.
Yeah, but she pushed back against the establishment's position on endless war, the openness that the president can have to wage war. I mean, they really, if that one issue, they were all exactly on the same page, and it took one brave person to say, it's a failure. It doesn't work. We have to stop it.
Well, Amy Klobuchar was also pretty good when she said, we're tired of being 10 minutes away from a war, one tweet away from a war with Iran. And she obviously meant this situation when Trump actually said that, I just asked our generals how many people are going to die. They said 150, and I canceled the strike 10 minutes before we went ahead. Well, if indeed Iran had been a terrorist state, if indeed the Revolutionary Guard had this ability to start terrorist actions in the United States in response, right? Then Trump would not be asking how many people are going to die in Iran. He would ask them how many people are going to die here, right? So when they say that we have firm evidence Iran is involved in terrorist activities, they're lying, because he never even mentioned that.
I don't, maybe they're lying. Okay, that's possible. But they're just plain ignorant is what they are. There is no interest in this law. Let me go back to Athens on this issue, because this is something that's very close to our heart, all three of us here. I mean, we're watching the Democratic Party essentially become the war party, and how dangerous that is. And when you have the American public that is so poorly informed on these issues, all of these candidates, with one exception, is grossly uninformed and not even interested, because endless war has become part of the political fabric, and the deep state, the arms manufacturers, the media are all in on it here. And we had this one brave person stand up. They've been trying to smear her, but that 7 minutes is the only thing memorable in that first debate. The second debate was a complete loss. Alex.
Yeah, I think the main point of both debates, Peter, is that no one looked presidential except for Tulsi Gabbard. And, you're right. They only gave her 7 minutes. I mean, they didn't give her any time to actually, introduce herself to America. Andrew Yang had his mic cut off. And now there's rumors floating around that NBC did it deliberately. They didn't want Andrew Yang to get his policy across to the American people. So NBC did a very, very poor job during these debates. For Tulsi Gabbard, she was the most searched person after the debate. No one is really reporting that. No one is talking about her. Peter, Dima, Trump needs to fire Bolton. Tulsi Gabbard needs to step in. That would be a killer move for 2020 if Trump did that.
But you stole that idea from whom? Because it's the same
from Pat Buchanan. That's right. He's exactly right. And Excellent. That would be an awesome, awesome outcome. And Trump would win 2020 without a doubt if he did that.
Let's go back to the debates, Alex. I mean, I thought the moderators were supremely awful. I mean, this was the ultimate softball debate that I think I've ever seen in my lifetime. No hard questions at all. I mean, like I said, they're in cahoots here. They want to maintain this monopolitical culture, this monopolitical conversation.
Yeah, I mean, Peter, they were asking questions where they had the candidates actually raise their hands. Yeah. It was like you were in school or something, and a teacher was asking students.
And on top of it, and we can talk a little bit about Joe Biden. Joe Biden would look around to see who was voting, to see if he would put his hand up. I mean, there's conviction for you. Go ahead, Dima. Jump in.
In Russia, there was some criticism of this debate, primarily because it looks like no one actually took into account the past of the candidates and of the moderators. I mean, Rachel Maddow, after 2 years of this witch hunt for the collusion between Trump and Russians, now she's asking questions, and no wonder one of the candidates named Beto O'Rourke is telling her that basically Trump has been unable to stand up to Vladimir Putin, who attacked and invaded our democracy in 2016 and was invited to do so again by Trump. When Trump said him, don't meddle in our elections, without roaring, he smiled. And all of the American media concentrated on that smile.
Maybe he should just focus. Let me go back to Alex. Maybe just Beto should work on his Spanish. I mean, maybe that'll help because his knowledge of international affairs is stand.
At the end of O'Rourke's statement, Trump has embraced dictators at the expense of great democracies. Which great democracies? Probably
Saudi Arabia,
UAE. Exactly. All of these people, yes. And people in Russia are asking, okay, can you just forget that Rachel Maddow has been saying it all of these 2 years? MSNBC's ratings went down because of her, because of these, endless hoax. Excuse me, it was a hoax about collusion. And the same thing with Tulsi Gabbard. A lot of Russians are asking, okay, she's saying nice words now, but she went to that war, which was profoundly unjust, at the very worst moment, when in 2005, 2006, when hundreds of thousands of people were killed.
If you look at both of those debate stages, there was only one person that had any kind of dignity at all, and Alexandra Christopher is absolutely right. She was presidential. Alex, I mean, I have to think Trump's flight back to the United States is going to have a huge bucket of popcorn. I mean, where's the gravitas on the Democratic side? There's nothing there. And on top of it, Bernie is looking more moderate. I mean, think of 2016. He was on the edge. Now he's in the middle. I mean, middle America is going to be, they're not going to recognize this kind of politics. And it's a politics that forgets them. The Democrats have learned nothing from 2016. The heartland continues to be dismissed as deplorables, and they want to replace the population so they get the vote they want. It's like the EU. If a vote fails, you keep going over and over again till you get the result you want. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think Bernie was the big loser out of this whole thing, this whole spectacle. And Joe, and I'll get to Joe Biden as well. Bernie was a big loser because he is a front runner, and he just looked angry, and his policies are just not radical at all. They're not radical enough, actually. And he came out just looking really, really poor. The optics were really bad. Biden actually cut himself off as he was speaking.
Unprecedented.
I've never seen anything like it. It was unprecedented. Could you imagine Biden going up against Trump? I mean, there is no chance. There is no chance. You had Beto and you had Cory Booker speaking in Spanish, Peter, and they didn't have any translations. What about the people that were watching the debate and were trying to understand what these two guys were saying? NBC didn't have anyone translating. No one. I mean, can you imagine Trump taking the abuse that Harris was giving to Biden? Can you imagine a debate where Trump is actually sitting there taking that? No chance. There's no chance that these people can go up against Trump. Trump is going to eat them alive.
Okay, we'll be talking about this a lot in the future, but it was Kamala Harris, interestingly enough, she's the one that's going to play the race card. She started playing the race card. 40 seconds, Alex, go ahead.
And it was staged, Peter. The whole thing was staged. She talked about an issue that no one has talked about for in 20 years. She had a photo of herself as a little girl.
40 years.
40 years of a little girl, ready to go on Twitter right away after this whole thing, went down. The whole thing was staged, and it wasn't fair for Biden. But Biden did not look presidential because he just took it. He didn't have a response for it. He looked weak. He looked confused. Trump is not going to be that easy to deal with. Not at all.
10 seconds, Steve.
It's interesting that O'Rourke accused Trump of embracing dictators, but they all forgot that Joe Biden, when he was in Ukraine helping the regime change there, he shook hands with Oleg Tyagnybok, who happens to be the founder of the National Socialist Party of Ukraine in 1991.
On that point, to be continued. Many thanks to my guests here in Moscow, Athens, and in London, and thanks to our viewers for watching us here at RT. See you next time, and remember, crosstalk rules. I had a great time.